Damn, I feel alive. No more stressing out, no more messing around, no more getting by.
Yes, that is just as I thought. All righty now, how may I help you? Oh, it is you. So wait, not so fast. Sorry about that. I'm very sorry we're having these double troubles. Please stand by. I think I'll put on my cute little sunglasses. What the hell? What is that I hear? Where did my little friend go? Oh. Hey, hello everybody! It's your old pal Grover.
Oh, hi there, this is Kermit the Frog. Gee, that sounds kind of interesting. Stay with us, folks. Things could break any minute now, but right now, back to our regular program. Now, do you think you can remember next time? Okay, places, please. We'll just try it again. Places. And here we go. And places, please. Quiet down. And here we go. And roll camera.
What took you so long? Well, the test isn't quite over. Nap time is next.
And a dilly too.
Oh, righty then.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Hello to everyone and welcome to Max Flat Earth. In this presentation, I have gone totally freaking loony. Well, folks, it's not actually me that's gone loony, but Google's, it seems, has gone completely nuts. In this presentation, I will be presenting the LOON Project from Google's. And wait until you see this. And as we all know on Flat Earth, that satellites do not exist at all. And here is what they plan on replacing them with. The LOON Project from Google's. Sending balloons all around the world to feed internet to everyone. Incredible. Let's dig right into this and take a look. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and like. Thank you.
Here we go. Charge!
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Sometimes everyone isn't really everyone. Like when people say everyone's on the internet, because the truth is, for each person that can get online, there are 2 that can't. And when you look closer, that everyone looks even less like everyone. In some places, it's more like 1 in 1,000. In others, it's 1 in 10,000. And in some places, no one's online at all. But what if there was a way to light up the entire globe and finally make all of the world's information accessible to all of the world's people? Well, even though today 1 in 3 kids can't get to a real secondary school, everyone could have secondary school come to them. In places where there aren't enough doctors, everyone could be helped by doctors in other places. Farmers everywhere could start using better weather data, so everyone could enjoy a bigger harvest. And because small businesses that are on the internet grow twice as fast, everyone could create new opportunities for everyone. But how do we bring affordable internet to everyone? Maybe finding an answer starts with looking somewhere new. Like up, and trying something different, like balloons. Yep, that's right. Balloons. Because it turns out that if you use balloons, it's faster and easier and cheaper to give everyone the internet than it is to give some people the internet. That's why we're giving it a try, and why there's hope that someday soon, everyone really will mean everyone.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
For the first time, it might be actually easier and less expensive to bring the internet to everyone rather than just some people. And with the internet comes education, it comes economic opportunities. With the internet comes, access to healthcare. And by connecting everyone, we'll finally be able to get that like 2/3 of the world's wisdom and insight and intelligence that we're currently leaving out of this conversation into that conversation. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I'm pretty sure the result is going to be spectacular. Loon is a network of free-floating stratospheric balloons. Now, if the balloons just floated entirely free, they would eventually drift to either pole, and that wouldn't be terribly useful. So our Loon balloons are these great big, sort of 15-meter in diameter things that float about 20 kilometers up in the sky, and we can move them up and down a little bit through about 1.5 kilometers of altitude. And by doing that, we can choose different winds, because in the stratosphere, winds at different levels go in very different directions. So by sort of choosing the appropriate wind, you can guide these balloons, and you can keep them in formation, and then keep the entire group together as they drift around the world. So the Loon balloons float in a group, and each Loon balloon has an antenna that provides the internet, kind of, you can imagine this cone of coverage on the ground. And right now on the ground, that circle of coverage is about 40 kilometers in diameter. And so as one Loon balloon is floating over, if you have an appropriate internet antenna, that's what we call these things, this is an antenna that points up at the sky. And so as Loon balloons drift over, this, which goes in the side of your house, will make a connection to that Loon balloon. And as the first balloon drifts off, another balloon is drifting in to take its place. So you never even notice that one balloon has left and a new one is there. There's just a continuous ribbon of coverage that's floating overhead, 20 kilometers up, and you get the internet. I think that in the not too distant future, maybe a couple of years away, we will have constellations of thousands of Loon balloons drifting in bands around the planet. And in many places that are rural and remote, you'll see houses or maybe farms or possibly little cafes with these internet antennas on them. And what these will do is they will bring connectivity to people who've never had it before. And through that connectivity will come education and healthcare information and other economic opportunities. And this world is going to be far better connected than it was before. But the other interesting thing about this is that not only will there be low-cost connectivity, but it's also connectivity that we can dynamically adapt. So in situations where there is a crisis on the ground, where terrestrial connectivity is limited because of a disaster, earthquake, whatever is going on, we can actually cluster more of these balloons, providing better network coverage. We can launch these balloons relatively quickly. So unlike, say, satellite communications, where you have a 5-year lead time, ultimately we think that we will actually be able to dynamically vary the coverage of Loon essentially in real time to respond to users' needs, and also to launch new connectivity relatively quickly in places that need it to fill in the gaps if the cell network goes down or whatever. So it's going to be a really interesting world, I think, with much more dynamic connectivity. And I believe in 10 years' time, it will just be commonplace. Well, of course there are stratospheric balloons overhead providing us connectivity. Just like right now, we think, well, of course there are satellites up there that are providing us connectivity.
Self-destruct in 15 minutes. There will be no further audio warnings.
The goal of Project Loon is to bring internet to the almost 2 out of 3 people in the world who don't have internet access today. And we're doing that using high-altitude balloons. 3, 2, 1. The very first tests we did showed that it could work. So we began to think, wow, we're going to need to have a manufacturing system that can manufacture many, many of these balloons. We're going to need to have a mission control system that can keep track of the balloons. We're going to need to have an operations team that can launch these balloons and then recover them when they're ready to come down. So each piece of the process got to be bigger. It had to scale up. It was pretty challenging, getting the balloons to be more durable and more long-lasting. For a while, many of them leaked for some reason or another, and they would come down over the course of a few hours or a few days. It was like a detective job to figure out what was introducing tiny leaks. Now our balloons last over 100 days. At first, it would take us 3 or 4 days to tape together a balloon. Today, through our own manufacturing facility, the automated systems can get a balloon produced in just a few hours. We're getting close to the point where we can roll out thousands of balloons. In the beginning, it was all we could do to launch 1 balloon a day. Now with our automated crane system, we can launch dozens of balloons a day for every crane we have. To steer 1 balloon left or right, you actually go up or down. And that's because in the stratosphere, the wind goes slightly different direction at a different altitude. To provide continuous internet service, you're talking a complex choreography where thousands of balloons are being steered and programmed all in an automated fashion. So another balloon is coming just at the right time to take its place of the one that left. Our mission control system allows us to track every balloon and lets us optimally position the balloons to provide coverage exactly where the people needing internet coverage are. We can track the location and projected trajectory of every balloon from the moment we launch it, on the way up till it reaches altitude, from the time we decide it's ready to bring it down, all the way down the descent till a spot on the ground. With our system, we use LTE, which is a common protocol that most of the telcos around the world use. So anyone with a smartphone anywhere in the world will be able to get internet access. One of the key things we do is we partner with the local telco in every country. In New Zealand, we're partnering with Vodafone.
We like to think of ourselves as being very innovative in Vodafone New Zealand, so we thought this was a great partnership. Project Loon allows cell phone companies and internet providers to provide an internet to communities that don't have it. Ultimately, the goal of any internet service provider is to have 100% geographic coverage and all the capacity and speed that people expect. Project Loon will help deliver that.
If you look at the system today, it's amazing how much more advanced it is, from being 10 times higher data rate to the balloons lasting over 10 times as long, to the steerability of the balloons. We've flown in the tropics, we've flown in the Arctic regions. The technology is working. We're getting close to the point where we can bring internet to people around the world.
On October 4th, 1957, history was forever changed as Sputnik, the first man-made satellite, launched into space. This great feat launched mankind into a new era of exploration and discovery. Man had always looked up into the heavens and pondered what was out there, what was beyond our reach. But now there is a whole new frontier, questions to be asked, discoveries to be made. We set our sights on exploring the universe and race to get there. Like we have always done in our past, curiosity propelled us forward to launching ourselves into hostile and alien environments. We had so many questions that we wanted answered, new problems that we had to overcome. All we could do was throw ourselves out there, hope for the best, learn from our mistakes, and then try again. With each new question answered, 10 more would arise, so we'd launch even more and more satellites into space. Although this was effective enough to make us content, there were unforeseen consequences to come. In order to launch an object into space, you need a tremendous amount of energy to do so, and energy isn't free. The reason why satellites and rockets cost millions and millions of dollars is because of the sheer size and amount of material and propellant needed to launch an object into orbit. For each kilogram of mass of a satellite, you need just that much more propellant to have sufficient energy to get it up there. On average, over half the budget for any satellite mission is reserved for the launch vehicle alone. Now once we get up into orbit, there are virtually no forces to bring it back down. Most satellites would take decades or centuries to eventually fall back to Earth. Therefore, if we wanted to bring it down ourselves, we would need to use fuel. More fuel means more mass. More mass means more propellant. More propellant means more money. There was never any reason to bring back dead satellites. They would burn up in the atmosphere before it ever reached the surface, so there was never anything we could learn from them or salvage. So instead, when a satellite dies, it is just left up there to orbit forever on its own. As the years went on, more and more satellites were launched into space. Although extremely small in size and relation, their numbers grew from hundreds to thousands of objects orbiting around our Earth, and things started to become polluted. In the beginning, it was easy to avoid everything. We could manage keeping track of where everything was, and we had developed better rockets capable of getting us closer to where we wanted and more accurately. But space debris was always a big concern. The reason why satellites don't fall back to Earth while in orbit is because they are moving at such high velocity. They are moving so fast that they are traveling further horizontally than they are falling downwards. They are stuck in an infinite circular freefall around our spherical planet. So when two objects moving this fast collide, it is like two speeding cars crashing head-on, but with more than 10 times greater the force. Two objects now become millions of smaller objects, still moving extremely fast and deadly to other satellites, but now significantly smaller and harder to track. We have been launching satellites for over 50 years now, and space has become very polluted with debris. We have been so carefree about what we did with our trash, we have now created a bigger problem for ourselves. The governments and aerospace communities are aware of this issue now, and have taken action by instating new regulations to help further stop the pollution by requiring all satellites to deorbit within 25 years after its lifetime. But this is only the beginning step. We need to work together to find solutions to clean up the debris around our planet so we may continue with our science and exploration. With the resources on Earth being limited, we will eventually be looking towards the stars to find new ones, but we must first learn to protect and live within the means of what we have now. Space is one of the few treasures for all of mankind left, but that means we, as a whole, must work together to maintain it.
If you've never seen one of these before, it plays a key role in your internet life. This is what carries your email, videos, and games all around the world. It's an undersea internet cable. It's being made right here in Kitakyushu, Japan, at NEC's OCC factory. OCC makes submarine cables, which carry virtually all internet data across oceans. The cables come in different varieties, including heavily armored ones, but they all start with bundles of optical fibers. The fibers are wrapped in layers for strength, starting with a steel tube, then steel wires and a copper tube, and finally a polyethylene sheath for water resistance. Enormous spinner machines and spools are needed to create the cables. When they're armored, the cables are wrapped in more steel wires and then asphalt and plastic strings. That makes them pretty tough.
Even though the single armor is just one layer, this is kind of difficult to bend.
Once manufacturing is complete, the cables are spooled into large tanks and then tested for water resistance and other parameters. The cable system includes large missile-shaped repeaters to boost the signal across the ocean. This 9,000 kilometer long cable is being created for the Trans-Pacific Faster cable that's backed by Google.
It is a 6 fiber pair system. Each fiber pair will carry 100 wavelengths of 100 gigabits. So the total capacity will be around 60 terabits. That is equivalent to about 1,600 DVDs, which can be transmitted over the ocean in 1 second.
Once it's ready, the cable is sent out along rollers to a cable ship docked by the factory. This is the René Descartes, owned by French telecom firm Orange. Dozens of workers are needed to load the cable as well as the large repeater units onto the ship. Once inside, the cable is fed into 3 tanks below the main deck, and they're huge, hot, and humid. The cable has to be looped very carefully to prevent tangles. Back up on the main deck, we can see a few of the tools needed to lay the cable. About the size of a small house, the plow Elodie is used to dig trenches on the coastal seabed where the cable needs to be buried for protection from anchors and nets. Next up is the Hector 6, an ROV that can work up to 2,000 meters below the surface of the ocean. It has caterpillar tracks for propulsion, jets to help bury the cable in its trench, as well as robotic arms to manipulate it. On the bridge, engineers can control the arms with small-scale replicas, as well as joysticks to control the ROV and plow. It takes a light touch and a lot of patience to install a cable all the way across the Pacific. In Kita, Kyushu, Tim Horniak, IDG News Service.
This animation of Alcatel-Lucent's state-of-the-art cable installation vessels takes us through the initial phases of a shore-end landing operation, plow deployment and burial of a submarine fiber optic cable. The cable installation vessel sets up as close as possible to the shore for the cable landing, where teams have the hauling and testing equipment ready on the beach. The installation vessel hands a messenger line to a workboat to connect the vessel to the shore. Deck teams attach floats to the cable as it is hauled to the beach. For this particular installation, the hauler is a bulldozer that pulls the messenger and the cable through a quadrant parallel to the beach. Once the cable end is secured on the beach, the floats are removed by divers. The cable is slacked off to the seabed in preparation for the plow launch. The armoured fibre optical cable is loaded into the 30-ton sea plow, which is overboarded, simultaneously controlling the cable, tow wire and umbilical tensions. The umbilical transfer the control commands and burial information to and from the plow control on the vessel to the plow on the seabed. Once through the splash zone, the plow is landed on the seabed and the required ploughing catenary is established. The HD3 series plow can simultaneously lay and bury cables down to water depths of 1,500 metres. Once the towing catenary has been established, the plow team on the vessel articulate the plow, allowing it to penetrate the seabed to the required burial depth. This plow series can plow to 3 metres burial, subject to soil conditions. Burial depth is controlled in 2 ways, raising or lowering the skids relative to the plow chassis or rotating the share about the chassis hinge. The trench depth is determined by either calculation from the skid, chassis hinge and rear stabilised positions, and also directly from the depth skid at the rear of the plow. These plows can achieve between 5 and 35 kilometres of burial per day, depending on seabed hardness. The simultaneous lay and bury of the fibre optical cable continues to an agreed plow recovery position. From this position, the cable is surface laid across the seafloor.
Subsea cables are vital to two major sectors of the global economy: telecommunications and energy, which includes interconnecting grids, oil and gas, and renewables. This video discusses the state-of-the-art in submarine cable laying, including the problems and cutting-edge tools being used by cable installers. First, let's see who is laying submarine cables and why. The telecom industry was the first to lay submarine cables in the 1850s. These cables are the backbone supporting the explosion of the internet, and 99% of the world's international telecommunication travels through them.
These cables are the backbone supporting the explosion of the internet, and 99% of the world's international telecommunication travels through them.
Renewable energy, especially offshore wind, and the increasing demand for grid interconnection between networks with excess electrical supply and others with excess demand. With energy prices rising, seismic oil exploration is being pushed into deeper offshore fields, requiring that ocean bottom cables be laid and retrieved very accurately in ever deeper waters. Cable laying techniques before the 1990s were still relatively crude, leading to cable failures. The basic issue was this: cable installers didn't have a good picture of what the cable was doing below the surface. Then, in the late 1980s, Mackay Ocean Engineering presented a solution. With modern computers, Mackay developed a rigorous 3D model of the cable called Mackay Lay that accurately computed and displayed the cable shape and touchdown conditions in real time. The Mackay Lay model can take into account the cable properties, all forces on the cable, the seabed contours, the ship maneuvers, and even ocean current readings from a current profiler in real time during the lay. Operators use Mackay Lay software to monitor and control the cable's position and bottom tension, allowing them to optimize the vessel's navigation and cable payout instructions for a safe and swift cable lay. These two variables, position and tension, are of the utmost importance for a cable lay. Mackay Lay provides control over the cable's position and tension at any depth. Here's how. During a lay, Mackay Lay gives the vessel and cable engine instructions to keep the cable right on track, and it retains a log of the as-laid path. For power cable lays, Mackay Lay can place the cable on the seabed with high accuracy, and can minimize or eliminate the need for expensive ROV touchdown monitoring. In addition, Mackay Lay can precisely control the retrieval of cables to minimize lateral dragging and damage. Retrieval speeds with Mackay Lay can be easily doubled, minimizing ship time and repair costs. Installing any type of cable with high slack can result in using more cable than is necessary and increase the chance of unwanted loops. Also, laying a power cable with low tension or slack can result in a damaging kink at the touchdown. On the other hand, installing a cable with tension that is too high will result in suspensions, leading to extreme forces at the contact points. This exposes the cable to higher current forces which vibrate the cable, causing wear and in some cases failure at the heavily loaded contact points. Mackay Lay provides tension control for power cable and flexible pipe installations where residual tension at the seabed is needed. A feature called auto tension can automatically adjust the cable payout speed and vessel navigation to keep tension within acceptable limits, paying out cable faster when tension is too high, and vice versa when it is too low. In 1989, Mackay Lay was first used to install a power cable through a treacherous and narrow corridor in deep waters. This remains the highest precision deep-water power cable lay in the world to this day. Since then, Mackay Lay has become the #1 subsea cable installation package in the world, used by over 75% of the world's subsea cable ships. And although Mackay Lay is for use on a vessel at sea for real-time installation and repair, Mackay has developed other very popular tools for route planning, simulation, and training for power, telecom, and seismic cable projects. Mackay Lay allows you to get your cable lay right the first time, minimizing the need for costly repairs and thus maximizing profits for owners, insurers, and installers. Visit us at www.mackay.com to learn how Mackay's tools can help with your power, telecom, or seismic subsea cable project.
Als reuzenkakteeën zijn op het Antilliaanse eiland Bonaire de masten omhoog geschoten van een tweetal nieuwe korte golfzenders die het mogelijk moeten maken de stem van Nederland in Noord-, Midden- en Zuid-Amerika luider te doen klinken. De in totaal 17 masten, waarvan de hoogste 103 meter is en die in de brosse koraalbodem een stevige fundering krijgen, worden hier gebouwd in opdracht van Radio Nederland Wereldomroep.
In die tijd waren Zuid-Amerika, Midden-Amerika, Noord-Amerika, maar vooral ook Nieuw-Zeeland en Australië hele belangrijke doelgebieden. En die konden vanuit Nederland slecht bestreken worden. In die tijd was het nog zo, tijd van de Koude Oorlog, dat elk land had zo'n beetje zijn eigen wereldomroep. Het was niet gebruikelijk om bij andere omroepen zendtijd in te huren. En Bonaire was een uitstekende plaats, vooral ook omdat we aan alle kanten door water worden omringd. En dat is erg goed voor de uitzendingen.
The transmitters were shipped from the Netherlands to Bonaire. But when they arrived on the Caribbean island, a problem emerged on the journey to the relay station.
Die zenders die kwamen in hele grote kisten, want destijds bestonden er nog geen containers. En ze hadden inderdaad een soort van dieplader gevonden met een of andere bulldozer ervoor. En die heeft de zenders naar het station gebracht. Het enige probleem was eigenlijk dit stukje hier, want het is behoorlijk smal hier. En bij de eerste kist bleek dus dat het er niet langs kon. En daar hebben ze een paar dagen over nagedacht en gekeken of er misschien nog een andere weg was aan de achterkant van wat nu het station is, maar dat lukte allemaal niet. En toen op een hele stille zondagochtend, heel vroeg, toen heeft de toenmalige projectmanager wat dynamiet geregeld bij de Salt Company en heeft een stukje van die rots daar afgehaald.
Dat mocht?
Nee, natuurlijk niet. Vandaar die stille zondagochtend. Maar wat hij zich dus niet realiseerde, dat was dat die rots in de loop van de tijd zwart wordt. En als je daar een stuk afhaalt, dan is die wit en dat duurt een paar duizend jaar voordat hij weer zwart is. En dat is nog steeds ons aandenken. Dus als wij hier dadelijk helemaal weg zijn, dan is deze witte plek nog te aandenken aan de keer dat we hier langskwamen.
The official opening of the relay station in 1969 was attended by numerous dignitaries from the Netherlands Antilles and the Netherlands itself. Queen Juliana wasn't present, but she made herself heard.
In een tijd waarin gebrekkige communicatie meer dan ooit zo versteurend kan werken, is het van belang dat ons eigen, bewust niet propagandistisch geluid een duidelijker klankbeeld kan geven van onze inzichten, onze cultuur, onze wijze van leven.
The relay station, with two of the world's most powerful transmitters at the time, provided a big boost to Bonaire's economy.
Op dat moment bood de Wereldomroep 45 arbeidsplaatsen. En dat op een eiland waar eigenlijk alleen het zout aanwezig was met 50 arbeidsplaatsen. De textielfabriek met iets van 100 arbeidsplaatsen, meestal ongeschoold. En dat was het wel zo'n beetje. Dus de Wereldomroep was buitengewoon belangrijk voor het eiland in die tijd.
Only 20 people still work at the relay station.
Op het moment waait het heel erg, dus dan komt het wel eens voor dat antennebreuk optreedt. En als je pech hebt, dan gebeurt dat bovenin, zoals vandaag. Dus dan moesten we die antenne laten zakken om wat boven gebroken is, om dat weer te repareren. En dan hoop je dat binnen een dag te doen en om minder schade te voorkomen.
Many of the employees have spent their entire working lives at the relay station. With the end of the shortwave era, they face an uncertain future.
Ik ben hier begonnen na mijn opleiding. Ik heb hier zelf stage gelopen nog in 88. En ja, je hebt een huis kunnen bouwen, je hebt auto's kunnen kopen, je hebt een familie kunnen opvoeden en dat valt allemaal weg nou. Ja, het is een grote klap voor iedereen.
The very last regular shortwave broadcast was in Spanish to Mexico and Central America.
Era toda alegría. Imitando al canario tuvo a bien decir algo y ensanchó la mentira. Que achicaran la jaula, que cortaran las alas, que forraran los quines con cartones y grises y que nadie saltara. En la jaula el sinsonte parecía contento. En toda la barriada su suerte era envidiada y los pájaros sueltos imitando el ejemplo cayeron en la trampa.
On June 30th, 2012, at 1:57 UTC, Bonaire fell silent.
Hi there, this is Aaron, and I'm here with a video which is a new proof of the impossibility of the sphere-Earth model, which is pushed on us all. Obviously, there are lots of ways to prove that the surface of the Earth has no curvature and is flat. But what's unusual about this one is this is really, you could describe this as a glitch in the matrix, because what I've found is that actually there are events in history which have been somewhat covered up, it seems, because they don't really fit with the sphere-Earth model. So these events that I'm talking about are radio broadcasts. If you look back through the history of radio, obviously radio goes back far before the time that we're told there were satellites and all sorts of other things. In fact, they go back to valve technology. Broadcasts are made from masts, and if you have a single mast broadcasting at any point on the Earth, shall we say, if obviously it was a globe, imagine a single mast broadcasting. Electromagnetic radiation travels in straight lines. The mast would not be able to broadcast around the curvature of the Earth. Now, if you look at, if you talk to shills and so on about radio, then they will, and you say to them, how is it that these radio broadcasts have reached, all this way around the world? They will try and tell you that there's relays all over the place. However, back in the early part of the 20th century, no such thing existed. When radio was first used, there were broadcasts done which are impossible in the sphere-Earth model, and the powers that be have tried to suppress knowledge of this. So, if you were to go to the Wikipedia page, for example, on the history of radio broadcasting, you wouldn't see anything suspicious. If you try to look back at the early history of the British public broadcasts, which were known as the Empire Service, you won't really be able to find any details, because there are people that have been working quite hard to put all this down a memory hole. The Empire Service was the precursor to what's now known as the BBC World Service, and the Empire Service was broadcast from the UK and was broadcast to the entire British Empire. Now, the British Empire, in order to reach all parts of the British Empire broadcasting from London, you are broadcasting across the entire known world. This is impossible unless the world is flat, essentially, because how would any mast be able to transmit around significant parts of the curvature of the Earth? It's completely impossible. So the Empire Service was in fact proving by its very existence that the sphere is impossible. However, it's very difficult to find details on this, so I've been looking for some time, hunting around for proof that these broadcasts were made, proof which is still actually available in the public domain. And I finally found some interesting proof when I came across a documentary from 1953. Now, this documentary was about transistors and about how the invention of transistors was going to change everything, which of course it did. And in one part of the documentary, it starts talking about broadcasts that were made from Arlington, Virginia in 1915. Now, these are made from a set of masts, and these radio broadcasts were picked up in Paris and Hawaii, according to this documentary, which is produced by various firms, including, I think, General Electric. And this documentary in 1953, they must have realised after that this is one of the items they'd better hide away, because it's only recently that this 1953 documentary has been re-released and is available. So I was watching this documentary, and sure enough, it started talking about these broadcasts and actually put up a little graphic map which I've snapshotted. And so you can see that they're claiming that these broadcasts were made in Arlington, Virginia, were picked up in Paris and Hawaii, significant distances around the curved surface of the Earth. And unless someone has a way to explain how these signals somehow reach their destination, I mean, no doubt shills will start talking about freak atmospheric phenomena and weather conditions and God knows what. But actually, if you look at the history of these ideas, that the atmosphere can interact with EM radiation, you'll see that those ideas were born after all of this, probably as a way to patch up the fact that it's completely impossible. Now, I don't think anyone has ever produced any evidence that radio waves which you send up into the atmosphere are going to get bounced down around the world, around the sphere of the world, what are they going to bounce off, and how does that work, and what is the evidence that there's any way for this to occur? It's just ridiculous. So I'm afraid they screwed up. They screwed up by being too proud of their worldwide transmissions, making a big song and dance about it, and then only too late realising that they just proved that the world is not a sphere. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I've given this info to various other people in the Flat Earth movement today, and hopefully they will be breaking this out as an additional killer proof. So yeah, so I hope that helps. Take care.
We are living in the neighborhood of a star sun. And sun is not a light bulb. Sun is a hydrogen bomb.
Well, of course, everything we do on the Earth and as a human society is affected by our interaction with the sun. The sun supplies not just our heat and light.
Sun is affecting our environment in so many ways. We have started to understand the multitude of processes, how our vulnerable planet is affected.
Continuously streaming from the surface of the sun is this magnetized solar wind, and as it rushes past the Earth, it actually interacts with and deforms the Earth's magnetic field.
This whole research area is grouped under the term space weather.
When the sun is very active, it can deposit a large amount of energy in the Earth's upper atmosphere.
The sun has effects, and then this causes weather in the upper atmosphere.
The atmosphere is a coupled system. All the atmospheric layers transfer energies back and forth between them.
If you want to understand a tiny part here, we have to understand all the interactions which happen in the system formed by sun, space, and Earth.
And the middle atmosphere is the least known part of the atmosphere.
The geometry of the Earth's field, basically, is such that the field lines are converging on the poles. So the polar regions are fantastic places to be because a wide area of the magnetosphere is imaged into a very small area of the ionosphere.
In Svalbard and northern regions, the magnetic field is vertical, and we are more directly connected to the sun than anywhere else in the world.
And these high latitudes are unique because it's where the energy from the sun is primarily dumped up here, which is why you only get the aurora over the northern and the southern polar regions.
For 30 years, IceCat has been studying the upper atmosphere with powerful radars and antennas in 3 different countries.
We are sending radio waves to the upper atmosphere near space in the scale of 2 million watts of radio power. That's a huge power. You could imagine that you have microwave ovens opening their doors. How many microwave ovens would you need to get this 2 million watts to the space?
There are very few facilities in the world where you can do these types of experiments.
Sending 2 million watts, we get 10 to the power minus 18 watts to our receiver. It's a tiny, tiny fraction of the power we send up. And in fact, we can measure simultaneously several parameters like the temperature there, the motions, the winds, the densities of particles.
A lot of people do want to come and use the system. It's one of the best systems in the world.
But why do we need to make these measurements?
You get these huge magnetic storms on the sun, which increase the amount of energy coming into the upper atmosphere.
These affect radio communications and GPS signals, satellite signals.
You have a mobile phone, you probably have satellite navigation in your car, you may even have a little handheld satellite navigation if you go off hiking anywhere.
The cause of them is not fully understood.
There's been problems in the past when huge magnetic storms on the sun have caused power stations over northern Canada to completely short out. But you can't predict when a solar storm is going to go off. The more data we can get, then we can hopefully predict these more. And the equivalent now is, obviously we can try and shut the satellites down, put them into a protective mode.
So predicting space weather will help to keep mobile phones working. But iSCAT can do much more than that.
9, ignition sequence start, 6, 5, 4, 3.
The astronauts on the Apollo missions really were lucky in their radiation doses. There was a few solar storms that went off, which were kind of a few days either side in some cases when they were up outside the protective shields. Now both America and Europe, China also and Russia are getting into more of the space race, more of the human kind of space race. Then we're going to need this information, otherwise you're going to be sending people up there, and you know they're really going to be struggling with these radiation doses.
Due to the fact that there are so many satellites and increasing all the time, there is a kind of pollution in space, because when they go out of operation, this is still stay there.
Some people say that space debris itself could be a catastrophe in the sense that the fragments that are already there can begin to collide together, creating smaller and smaller fragments, and the whole thing might be a cascade process that eventually fills the Earth's environment with small fragments and almost denies our access to certain regions of space.
The number of objects in space is increasing all the time. This radar is one of the most powerful instruments that are able to detect these small objects in space. It can be possible even to avoid some catastrophes, you know, by having this knowledge of where these objects are.
Protecting spacecraft and safeguarding the lives of astronauts is important in itself, of course. But what about the rest of us here on planet Earth? How does iSCAT help us?
The climate models in these regions of the world have the biggest uncertainties.
By looking at the upper atmosphere, we can have maybe a 10 times better sensitivity to climate change in studying parameters up there.
The polar regions are extremely important for climate models to have accurate values for predictions far into the future.
If we're going to try and do something about the climate change, then we have to keep the measurement series going to see whether or not what we're doing is working or not.
So measurements of the upper atmosphere can help us understand climate change. But does climate change itself affect the upper atmosphere?
In the lowest part of the atmosphere, there's a greenhouse warming, which is making an expansion of the lowest part of the atmosphere. But when these greenhouse gases diffuse into the middle atmosphere, then they actually act as refrigerants, and the middle atmosphere is actually cooling and therefore shrinking. And the ionosphere is therefore sitting on top of this, and it's occurring progressively lower and lower down. And here's part of the data series. Here we're looking at the height of one of the ionospheric layers. So you can see that the height was fairly constant, if not increasing a little bit until the end of the 1970s, and around 1978 it started decreasing very distinctly.
The evidence suggests, therefore, that climate change below also influences the very nature and dynamics of the ionosphere. But is there any evidence that human activity is directly affecting the atmosphere this high up?
There is a phenomenon in the mesosphere that occurs at about 80 kilometers of altitude, which are noctilucent clouds produced by very small ice particles. They produce very strong signals in the radar, so they are very easy to observe when they happen. A big question about this phenomenon is to explain why there is water there producing these ice particles and the clouds. And it appears that these clouds were first observed by the end of the 19th century. The reason why we believe that there is water at this altitude is due to the diffusion of methane that is produced here on the surface.
Methane, a significant greenhouse gas, appears to be changing the atmosphere at heights that were previously thought to be unaffected by human activity. So the importance of understanding the upper atmosphere is clear. For radio communications, energy supplies, human health, even climate change. And IceCat is leading the way to improve this knowledge. But what are the limits for the IceCat facility?
We don't know, basically, exactly what's going to happen in a certain location. We can say, like I said, there's energy coming from the sun, but we can't say it will happen at this location or it's going to last for this long.
IceCat has been amazingly successful as an international research facility, but the limitations are clear. Our present systems are based on these large parabolic and cylindrical antennas.
These are big 32, 42 metre dishes and bigger.
We can only do measurements in 2D by swinging the radar back and forth.
Those are capable of only pointing in one direction at once, and they move very slowly.
So it takes a finite amount of time for those to scan across the sky.
But in those 2-3 minutes, there is a lot of change.
So you could be looking in one direction, something suddenly happens behind you.
And our recent measurements show that changes occur on timescales of seconds.
So the next stage of development for IceCat will be something truly exceptional.
This capability will be unique.
For the first time we will be able to separate time and space and resolve all those fine-scale structures.
This is an exciting opportunity for us.
IceCat 3D will allow you to look in multiple directions very, very rapidly.
Possible because it will be a phased array.
The next generation of IceCat, IceCat 3D, will be more like the Morrow phased array radar over there, capable of either forming multiple simultaneous beams or scanning a single beam very quickly on the order of milliseconds rather than the minutes it takes us to move our existing dishes. But what is astonishing is the scale.
If you would think about an antenna field of 100,000 antennas,
the largest and most sophisticated radar facility ever built. It's a very ambitious project.
The existing antennas in Tromsø are second generation radar. The radar up here is like third generation radar. Americans have built something I would call the fourth generation, and IceCat 3D will be the fifth generation above everything that currently exists.
In this technological age, this area of space surrounding the Earth is becoming critical to human activity. Understanding those conditions, the space weather, is as important as understanding the weather down here on Earth. What we're doing with IceCat 3D is trying to build one of the world-leading elements in the chain of instruments and facilities that enable us to understand the behaviour of the Earth's environment and predict it. That really is one of the key technological challenges for human society in the 21st century.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I have gone loony, but I'll be all right in the morning. Don't worry so. And to think that Google can fly balloons all around the world and bring internet to everyone is pure nonsense. But at this point, I leave it all up to you to decide which is which. You make up your mind which is reality and which is nonsense, and pure fiction. Don't forget, folks, the system for bringing internet to everyone is already in place. The undersea cables are already there. No need for balloons flying around in the air. Take a look here how this hot air balloon reacts in bad weather, and tell me if flying balloons around the world is possible at all. Pure nonsense. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe, and ring the bell for further notifications. Thank you, and have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye for now.
Hi. 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 Hi there.
Wow.